Who needs the saints, right? That's a good question. I mean, who needs those boring plaster statues or those like banal stained glass windows of these dead people, basically? And I used to think that too. I used to wonder what the point of the saints was. What do we need them if we have God or if we have Jesus? What do we need them at all for? When I was 9 years old, I saw an advertisement in the back of a Spider-Man comic book for a plastic statue of St. Jude, who was patron of the impossible causes. And I thought, well, for $3.50, I'd like a statue of the patron of the impossible causes who can pray for me. So I sent away for it, and about 2 weeks later, I got this 9-inch beige plastic statue that I promptly put on my dresser drawer and started to pray to him. And at the time, my prayers were along the lines of, let me do well in Little League this year, let me get an A on my spelling test, let my skin clear up, those kinds of things. And St. Jude stood patiently atop my dresser drawer until about high school, when my high school friends would start to come by and I'd feel a little embarrassed about this kind of weird beige plastic statue on the top of my dresser. And he got relegated to inside my underwear drawer, where he stayed for the next couple of years, only to be brought out on special occasions like the SATs. And he came out, he made a special appearance for the SATs. And I guess you could say my faith was another thing that got relegated to the sock drawer for the next few years. Later in high school and in college, I really only became a sort of occasional churchgoer. And as my faith grew weaker and weaker, my affinity for the saints and for St. Jude really kind of diminished. That changed for me about age 26. After about 6 years in the corporate world, I started to think about doing something else with my life, and I really didn't know what that was going to be. One night I came home and I turned on the television set, and there was a documentary about a Trappist monk named Thomas Merton. I knew nothing about Thomas Merton, but something about the documentary really appealed to me and got me on a sort of search to know more about him. I read his autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain, which talks about how he left his life and entered a Trappist monastery. And I started to think that would be kind of a fun thing to do, and one thing led to another, and in a couple of years I entered the Jesuits, which is a Catholic religious order. When I entered the Jesuits, I found out that a lot of my Jesuit novices, the young Jesuits, had a real strong affinity to the saints. And something I thought was really superstitious and that I had sort of stuck on my sock drawer started to become more important to me. And in the novitiate, I started to read these lives of the saints, stories of people like Therese of Liseux, of Thomas Merton, of Blessed John XXIII. And I started to see how the saints aren't just people we pray to, they are real people whose lives can serve as examples for us. And gradually, I started to feel a real affinity towards these people, towards these saints, as if they were real friends of mine who could help me through difficult times and lead me along the way to God. I count them as sort of one of the great blessings in the spiritual life. And so I went from someone who was really superstitious of the saints and kind of dismissed them to someone who really thinks of them as one of the treasures of the faith. All this I like to think is thanks to St. Jude, who for all those years stuck inside my underwear drawer was praying for someone who didn't even know he was being prayed for.